All right, let's try a little thought experiment together. Imagine you just walked into a room, and in this room, there are exactly 50 total strangers. Just picture that space for a second. You feel the subtle hum of conversation starting, the clinking of glasses, the awkward shifting of bodies. Well, within minutes of being there, you'll start to notice something absolutely fascinating. People naturally begin to fall into very specific roles, almost like actors stepping onto a stage, except it's completely unscripted. You've got one person confidently leading the conversation, right? Just commanding the room with this magnetic energy. Meanwhile, someone else is standing way in the back, arms crossed, quietly observing the whole room before saying a single word. Someone is already cracking jokes to cut the tension, and another person instinctively makes a beeline to comfort the awkward newcomer who just walked in. Now, you'd probably think, okay, some of these folks are just putting on a show, right? Playing to the crowd. But here's the wild part. None of them are pretending. Seriously. Whether they're dominating the chat, making people laugh, or just quietly people watching from the corner, they aren't faking it. They're actually giving us a sneak peek into their true, authentic selves. They're showing us glimpses of something psychologists and neuroscientists have spent literally centuries trying to decode. It's the silent force that influences almost every decision we make, from who we trust, to who we love, to how we handle sudden, unexpected failure. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the narrative of who we are. We're going to play detective and uncover the hidden architecture of human personality, what we'll call the invisible code. We're skipping the silly internet quizzes and oversimplified myths today. Instead, we're going to use real psychology, cognitive science, and some everyday stories to figure out how these underlying frameworks shape absolutely everything we do, long before we even realize we're making a choice. So that brings us to a really massive question. Can this invisible code actually be read? I mean, can we genuinely look past what people say and spot the exact patterns driving their behavior? Or are we all just kind of guessing when we try to figure people out? Because if we can genuinely read this code, if we can map out these invisible psychological structures, we might never look at the people around us the exact same way again. Let's look at a story about two medical students to see how this plays out in real life. They go to the exact same lectures, read the exact same textbooks, and honestly, they're equally brilliant. But how they handle the pressure, night and day. The student on the right is your daily studier. They calmly review material every single afternoon, methodically chipping away at the syllabus. The crammer on the left, though, they pull frantic all-nighters right before the exam, totally thriving on that last-minute adrenaline rush. One feels super energized in loud group discussions, while the other craves the deep focus of studying completely alone. If an attending physician gives them harsh criticism, one might completely spiral into panic and take it personally, while the other takes that exact same criticism and uses it as intense fuel to do better. Why? It's tempting to just say one has a better work ethic, but clinical psychology tells us a different narrative. It's actually their underlying personality dictating these paths. Basically, you can think of personality as the operating system of the human mind. It's just like your smartphone, right? Different operating systems can run the exact same apps. They can process the same info and achieve the exact same level of success, but they use totally different architectural routes to make it happen in the background. It's this relatively stable set of traits and neural pathways that processes the world differently for every single one of us. Now, personality isn't destiny. It doesn't lock you into a predetermined path, but it absolutely shapes the journey. It's the filter for how every single piece of data is perceived and acted upon. But here's the mystery. If this internal operating system is so incredibly powerful, where on earth does it come from? This is still one of the biggest questions in human science. Are we just born with it? Is this invisible code hardwired into our DNA before day one? Or does life sort of sculpt us slowly over time through our environment? Well, as psychologists and geneticists have found out, it's a really intricate balance. It's both nature and nurture. On one hand, you've got your roots. That's your DNA, your biological blueprint. That's your foundation. But then you have the branches, your environment, your family dynamics, the culture you grow up in, your education. Personality isn't just an either-or situation. It grows from those genetic roots for sure, but it gets pruned and shaped and expanded continuously by the world around us. You've probably heard about those famous studies of identical twins separated at birth. Just think about that narrative for a second. Two people, exact same DNA, but they grow up in completely different countries, totally different lives, different schools, different friends, and yet when researchers bring them back together decades later, the evidence is honestly mind-blowing. Despite living entirely parallel, disconnected lives, these twins still share a ridiculous amount of underlying traits. They have shockingly similar habits, identical food preferences, the exact same biological stress responses, and even the same quirky sense of humor. So yeah, the genetic roots clearly matter in a massive way. So to put it simply, genetics is the blueprint, but experience builds the house. You can't have the house without the blueprint, obviously, but a blueprint is just paper until you actually assemble the materials. Take a naturally shy, highly sensitive kid. Put them in a deeply supportive, encouraging family, and they might become incredibly empathetic and quietly confident. Take that exact same kid with that exact same genetic blueprint, but put them in a chaotic, highly critical environment, they might become totally withdrawn and permanently guarded. Our life experiences are constantly modifying how our innate personality develops. Let's pull all this together with one final story. Picture a really tense classroom. The teacher stands up front and drops a ridiculously hard, complex question about the prefrontal cortex. Instantly, the room goes dead silent. You know that feeling, right? Eyes drop to the desks. You can literally feel the tension in the air as everyone just prays they don't get called on. It's one question, but we're about to see two totally different responses, driven by entirely different inner worlds. On one side of the room, a student immediately shoots her hand up. She's not 100% sure of the answer, but she's bold and she's super comfortable taking risks. She's driven by recognition, so to her, this high-pressure challenge is just a fun opportunity. But across the room, another student actually knows the perfect textbook answer, and he says absolutely nothing. He's cautious, hyper-aware, and deeply afraid of being wrong in public. For him, speaking up is a threat to his carefully maintained self-image, so he prioritizes safety and stays totally silent. Now, if you were just watching this unfold, you might wonder, okay, who's the smarter student? The truth? You literally can't tell. Because the difference between throwing a hand in the air and staying silent in that moment isn't about intelligence, it's personality. The engine driving their behavior isn't raw brain power at all. It's how their unique, deeply embedded operating systems calculate risk, navigate safety, and chase rewards. And what that really means for us is that this internal code shapes how we think and act way before our actual abilities are put to the test. Before your intelligence or skill even gets a chance to show up on a standardized test or a medical board exam or a high-stakes job interview, your invisible code has already decided if you're going to aggressively raise your hand or hang back in your comfort zone. It's the silent filter for every single move you make. So the next time you walk into a room full of strangers, or honestly, just look in the mirror, I want you to ask yourself, what is your operating system making you do? Are you leading, observing, risking, protecting? Take a hard look at your own invisible code, because once you understand the software running in the background, you're going to see every daily decision you make in a completely new light.